Welcome to Accelerate Your Wealth, a podcast by Rebecca Robertson, founder and director of Evolution Financial Planning. We hope you enjoy the show, and please feel free to leave us a review. It really does help. Feel free to connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram, or head over to www.rebeccarobertson.co.uk or our sponsor, Evolution Financial Planning, for regulated advice on www.evolutionfinancialplanning.co.uk/podcast.
Welcome to today's show. I've got three wonderful ladies joining me. I have Laura, I have Jenny, and I have Emma. And I'm just going to allow them to introduce themselves because I think they do a better job of it than I will. And they're also going to tell you a little bit about why they're here today and what their divorce experience has been. So hi, Laura. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, I've just back from holiday, so I'm fine today. Ask me tomorrow, it might be a different answer.
Thank you so much for having me. As I said, my name's Laura. I have come across you, Rebecca, through the online space. I run my own business as a freelance COO to small businesses and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm here today with you is because I always say I had the world's most friendliest, amicable divorce on history. He is still my best friend.
Never heard anyone say that, I've got to say.
That's what I'm saying. I'm your woman. He's still my best friend. We had a great divorce. It was, we're absolutely amazing now we've been through it. It was absolutely the right decision for both of us. And I've just got so many success stories that I can share about how it's working out, how we orchestrated it all.
I love that. Oh, thank you for showing up and sharing that. I think that's what I hear so much negative, obviously because clients come to me in the thick of it. So the fact that you've got a positive, I've got to ask, like, if he's that great, why did you divorce?
It's funny because whenever I talk about our divorce, I have to check in with him what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. But basically, I think looking back now, we didn't understand each other's love languages is ultimately what happened. Wow. So I think we didn't understand what each of us needed to feel loved and therefore actually did opposites. And by the time we got to divorce and we found out about love languages, we discovered that his top was my bottom and my bottom was his top. So we're almost doing the exact opposites, but so much so that we couldn't do what each of us needed us to do.
I got it. I understand. My husband is a man of very few words and I'm a woman of many words. So I get it. I totally get it. But it's great that you've got a great outcome. Thank you for coming along today, and I can't wait to hear more about what you've got to share and how you've made that successful. So thank you for helping other women listen to the show and spread the positive message about divorce being a good thing. Emma, have you ever heard of like a good divorce then? Is that the first?
It's not the first, but I don't know if I've had a story quite as positive as Laura. So I'll be actually really interested to hear what Laura has to say, because it is possible to have a good divorce. It isn't easy and it doesn't happen to everybody, but intention is a big part of it. It's like deciding that that's going to be the thing that you want, but also recognizing when to let go of that so that you don't end up in a situation that isn't right for you.
Got it. Well, on that note, Emma, would you like to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about what you do?
Thanks, Rebecca. So it's lovely to be here today. My name's Emma. I'm also known as the Divorce Alchemist. I was a family lawyer before becoming a divorce coach, and I've been doing it since 2015. And I do that through a membership and online programs and one-to-one coaching. Specifically, usually in the area of high conflict, and that's something that found me, not that I went looking for. So again, Laura's story is going to be really inspiring, I'm sure, because many of my clients are not in the fortunate position that Laura has been in. And so I'm not divorced myself, so I haven't lived that experience. I take the experience I've had over many years working predominantly with women, but not exclusively, and ladies who choose to leave specifically, rather than those that come to divorce when it's not their choice. But either way, the process is still the same. The legal process is the same. The emotional impact of divorce is often very different. And I help them make good decisions emotionally, get ready financially, find the right financial people, such as yourself, Rebecca, to help them plan for a good divorce.
Amazing. What a useful little tool you are in their little back pocket to have. Well, I'm sure when they're having this conflict and these conversations, and many of the women that I speak to that have gone through the same, probably similar to your clients, they're super nervous, they're super scared. And I can only just imagine, like, if I was put in my shoes, you know, in their shoes, I should say, I think it does make put a lot of fear in people. Now, I'm going to introduce Jennie. So Jennie, I know a little bit, and Jennie always comes across as super confident. And I'm interested to see what her story is about. So Jennie, hi, how are you?
Hello, yes, lovely to be here. So yeah, my name's Jennie. I run a project management company and an online cocktail company. I got divorced in 2019. It took me several years to get the courage up to initiate the wish to have a divorce. And we had a very amicable divorce. We separated and got divorced within 4 months, and everything was quite good. But everything went wrong about a year later, post-divorce. So actually, I had a great divorce and I used a divorce coach, but it went wrong a long time afterwards.
Wow. Okay. So I want to delve into that, and I think now we've done the introductions. I've got something in my head I want to ask all three of you, but before I do, you've got to tell us what happened, Jennie. What happened after?
So we had a very amicable divorce, like I said. It was all on the unreasonable behaviour. I went for divorce on unreasonable behaviour. I had 4 or 5 really strong points. We'd had a really awful relationship for quite a long time, but it took me a very long time to get over the guilt of wanting to get divorced. I felt very guilty about that. Even though my children were teenagers, I still felt really guilty. And then after about maybe 2 years, I think it was 2 years later, someone said to me that they'd seen a post on Facebook where my ex-husband and his girlfriend, who he was with, had been together, announcing they'd been together for 5 years. And most unfortunately, my daughter then started to look back through things on social media, which, yes, there was a significant amount of things that had happened in 5 years whilst we were together, we weren't divorced, hadn't even talked about it. And unfortunately, the outcome from that is that the girls don't actually speak to my ex-husband at all, and the relationship completely broke down. And that's 100% on their merits. Like, I've really encouraged them to consider their relationship with their dad, but the dishonesty and the way that it's been approached, unfortunately, has broken their relationship down.
Wow.
That's
God.
so
So
sad.
I actually instructed my solicitor to go back to him after the divorce and the full and final settlement and everything, because I thought he was moving out on his own, he wouldn't have any money. I felt really guilty, right? And obviously I hadn't taken child maintenance for Lucy at all. And then I instructed my solicitor to go back to him, and I thought, I'm not having this. I'm not having it, you know. And I'd paid for a holiday for them to go on holiday. He told me it was for something else. I'd given him money for different things, and I just thought, I'm not having it.
No, gosh, how dishonest. Just changed you talked about a lot about guilt, right? You talked a lot about how you were, like Emma mentioned, about the ladies who leave, and you're making a conscious decision to actually step away from the relationship, which was one of my questions to sort of approach. And you've sort of approached it from a slightly different angle with the fact that you were choosing to leave, but he was already having an affair.
And he never offered that at any point. You know, it was, I had to do the doing, and I had to say he was unreasonable. And, you know, my solicitor was really firm with me, like, you have to have very good reasons, else you might not get a divorce granted. And, you know, it was not a painful process in that way, but it's still quite hard to write those things, even if it hasn't been particularly pleasant.
Yeah,
I
sure.
remember doing my reasoning because we did our divorce ourselves. We didn't use any solicitors. So I did my reasoning for unreasonable behaviour and they threw it straight back. They were like, that's not a reason, even though it was things like, we're not in love with each other anymore. Like,
It's not
there
enough.
are very specific reasons. And so when I did the real version, like got a little bit of advice about what would actually get through, I said to him, it's going to cut, a copy is going to come in the post. Don't read it. It's not nice. It's not going to be good, but you have to be quite hard, don't you, in those reasonings? Well,
Yeah.
quite rightly
Well,
so. It's a serious.
Fortunately, we've moved on. So in April 2022, the law changed.
Yes.
So now we're in a position whereby you don't have to sling mud at anybody. Did I say April 2022? I think I meant 2023, didn't I?
Yeah, I think
April 20. It was April 2023. I beg your pardon. So then, now you decide you don't want to be married anymore. That's the end of it. And actually, that helps for many people, with the starting of the process. It's like, I don't want to be married. I don't have to give my reasons. I just have to say, I don't wish to be married anymore. But even in a situation like yours, Jennie, it doesn't mean that your husband would have been any more honest in the way that he has behaved. And how sad is that the two of you managed to move through it, but the impact on your children has been huge.
Yeah, and my girls are both in their 20s now, and for them, you know, the impact's been absolutely massive. And several times I've tried to revisit it, and you know, when things have happened, you know, my daughter lost a friend, and I was like thinking maybe that would trigger her to want to have that relationship, but you know, they're adults, they have to make their own choices. And actually, I don't think he's particularly approached them to pick the relationship up, or not for a long time. So it's really difficult, because for me, you only get one mum and you only get one dad, regardless. And actually, it's better to have a nicer, even if you don't speak, relationship than some sort of hostility in the background.
Yeah, exactly. What kind of, like, this is a bit of a generalist, and Emma, I'm not sure, I think in your situation, the type of clients you'll have, they're maybe a bit more severe. But for women that are thinking that maybe they're listening, they're like just not happy in their relationship. There's not, you know, there's no like adultery going on. There's no sort of abuse and financial abuse, economic abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse. There's nothing major. And Laura, maybe there's more on the side of where you were, where you just weren't happy. What kind of red flags, what kind of situation would these women find themselves in where they're thinking, I need to walk away from this relationship?
I mean, I was talking to a lady maybe about 2 weeks ago, and she said, my husband is a really lovely guy. I just don't love him, and therefore I don't want to be married to him anymore, because there's nothing wrong with him as a person. He's great as he is, but there's no chemistry, there's no spark, and I want more, and it's okay to want more. And with the change in the law, it is now possible to get out of that marriage. Interestingly, with her, there is financial abuse going on, but she doesn't recognize that that's what it is. And that is the thing that is so common, because abuse is not an episode of EastEnders or, you know, something that happens on Coronation Street. Those are extreme examples that the media picks up. But actually, if you don't have access to your own money, or he wants to know exactly where every single literally every penny that you spend, or he's commenting about where you spend your money, that is abusive. And if you have been experiencing that kind of relationship for a decade or more, to you that's normal. Whereas anyone looking in would go, oh, hang on a minute, what do you mean that you have to account for every penny? Or you're not allowed to drive to a particular petrol station because it's 2 miles further away than the cheaper petrol station. That is controlling behaviour, and it isn't normal. No. And so when we look at the challenges that women face, it's often just recognising where they're at, because we all live in our little relationship bubbles. And even though as women quite often chat, if there's anything that we're not really sure about, we don't even say things that we think, oh, we might get judged if we admitted that this was happening in our relationship. So we just won't say anything. And then you don't have anything to sort of check it against, and you think
saying it out loud is almost like admitting there's something going on, right?
yeah.
It must be like a bit of a niggle that you just don't want to acknowledge, because actually it's easier going the day by day and just doing what you got to do. And I've been with my partner 24 years. It's a long time. We obviously in that time have had lots of ups and downs. And it's deciding, okay, is this just a down and we're good? Actually, like, I want to be here, and checking in, going, I still want to be here, right? Yeah, I do want to be here. And then if you're sort of like, I just assume, months go by and you're thinking, actually, I don't want to be here. And a few months go by and you're like, yeah, I still don't want to be here. I mean, is that how it was for you, Jennie and Laura? Am I describing something that you're resonating with at all?
Yeah, I mean, I probably felt like that for, I would say, years, not months. And I used to think to myself, oh, I wish my partner would just find somebody else. And actually he had done. And I think if he'd have been honest, which you can always say in hindsight, oh my God, if he'd just been honest, I'd have been so fine with it. I mean, I might not have been fine with it, but it would have made it an easier position, because it took me such a long time to get the courage to do it, that actually we wasted time in our lives. And actually, when you're in your 40s, you don't want to be wasting time in your life, do you? So yeah, I 100% resonate with that.
How about you, Laura?
What Jennie just said there just reminded me, because I was sort of toying with it for ages, and I used to sort of say to myself and my closest friends, I just wish he was a horrible person. Like, can he not just push me around a bit, or cheat on me or whatever? I know that's really bad, but there was nothing on paper that was awful. Yes, he was a angry, negative man that I didn't enjoy living with. So it got to a point where it was like he's sapping all of the positivity out of me, and I didn't want, I had a choice. I didn't want to be around that all the time. And the other sort of deciding things for me were that we became friends raising children, and I didn't want the children to see that that's what a marriage is about. I wanted to display to them a loving, connected, affectionate relationship, and it wasn't that at all. Like, we weren't arguing, we weren't hating each other, but we were just friends raising kids, and I didn't want that for them. I didn't want them to think that that was normal. I think the turning point for me was when I sort of thought to myself, like, yes, you've got all the finances and it's all very scary and life's going to change, and we're going to upheave all the children potentially. And I used to think, yeah, but I'd be happier if we were in a 2-bedroom flat. I'd be just as, I'd be happier. And the happiness just got to me of, just not wanting to be in the relationship, having the happiness sucked out of me, not waiting to, I'm sure I would have ended up descending into depression and things. And I just wanted to put my own mental health before that.
You chose you, really, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. And it to be honest, it took some convincing. It took me a long time to convince him that it was the right thing to do. But again, the problem with that is he'd say things like, but we've got a nice life, and we've got nice cars, and we go on nice holidays, and I don't want the children to come from a split home, and I love this house. But he never said to me, I can't live without you. I have to keep you in my life. I literally can't envisage my life without you. That never came. It wasn't about me, it was about what we'd created. So yeah, it's a hard decision, and I feel for people that can't get out of their relationships through things like finances. I've got lots of friends that are stuck in unhappy relationships because of the finances. And I feel for people. I just feel so blessed that I was brave enough and had the opportunity to move forward for what I needed, really.
And that's why I'm an advocate of very much what I do, because I believe in women not necessarily being financially independent. Like, I could move and I'd out and I'd be okay. I wouldn't be as comfortable, obviously, but I would be okay. I might have to sell a horse or two, but otherwise I'd be okay. but being caught, I saw a lot of my family members really caught in relationships and really stuffed, if I'm honest, after the divorce. I mean, Jennie, you've always sort of been quite entrepreneurial and had your own business or been employed. So was you scared about the financial element or not?
Yeah, I was to start with, but I probably spent 3 years getting to a point where I knew I'd be able to take the house on and I'd be able to get a mortgage for the whole amount. And I think that was my biggest thing, is I have to maintain a roof for me and the girls. Like that's like an absolute, we must. So I worked really hard to get myself to a point where I knew I'd be able to get the mortgage to cover buying him out and, the rest of the house for me. And it was when I got to that point where I knew I would get the mortgage that I knew I could do it, because I thought, I cannot lose the house. Like, it's the one thing that we need as stability. And I'd felt very, very guilty about that, very guilty. And when I said to my divorce lawyer, some of the things that he'd said to me about, well, we'll just put it on the market, there was no thought of where we would live. He just wanted his money. And as soon as I understood that, I didn't feel guilty anymore. I thought, actually, all he wants is the money to move on and start again. As long as I can give him that, then that's fine. He won't, I don't need to feel guilty about keeping the house. And that was a massive turning point for me. Knowing I could afford the house, I was fine then.
And I think that's an important point, Jennie, because lots of women stay stuck because they're too scared to even look and explore what a financial settlement might look like. Or they don't believe enough in themselves to think that, okay, it might be tricky for a year or two, but actually over time, I can do this, because the idea of being financially independent is overwhelming, really scary. Or if they've got a difficult soon-to-be ex-partner, they've got someone in their ear telling them that they won't manage if they leave, and they just automatically believe them. So a lot of the work that I do in the early stages is just getting people familiar with numbers. So I have a little phrase, and it is no negotiating without knowing your numbers. So if he says, you have the house, I'll keep my pension, many women will go, oh yes, that sounds amazing. Well, it might be, but oftentimes it's not, and oftentimes it's not affordable or the right thing to do. So if you know your numbers and you know what you spend and you know what you might be spending and you know what you're capable of generating, income from all sources, child benefit, universal credit, a part-time job, going full-time, whatever it might be, you can then have a plan to leave your man, as I say. It's like, plan it, and they go, but women go, oh, but it's underhand and it's deceitful and I really shouldn't do that. And I'm like, no, it's just smart. Actually, it's really smart, because if you feel comfortable about your next steps, you can help your lawyer because you've got some idea about what your asset base is, what your ability to earn money is. But you'll also be encouraged to think about your husband and what his needs are and what his earning potential is and what his borrowing capacity is, as well as your own. And therefore you get this bigger picture that over time just unfolds, and you go, oh yeah, it is doable.
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest parts that people come to me for, because if I'm honest, they're not all like Jennie, where she's sort of going, I'm going to go and earn more money to be in a position to take over on my own. Some of them are older and they haven't had, they've had maybe some gaps in their employment, and therefore they might be working part-time or not at all. And they're in a situation where they've got a pension from 20 years ago, but haven't paid into it for 20 years. All the assets are in his name. He's like being a bit cloaky about financial disclosure, and they're not in a position where they feel like they should have to go out and get a job and work really hard when the agreement was, we're going to do this together. But then they're expected to sort of live two separate lifestyles on one income. And she's asking for not only just maybe child maintenance, she actually wants spousal maintenance, and basically doesn't want her lifestyle to really change. That's what I see quite a lot of. And when the reality kicks in, which it does eventually, that, well, if you want to get a mortgage and you do happen to have space or maintenance, which is quite hard to get these days, it has to be court agreed for you to get a mortgage on it, and you might not get the term of the mortgage that you want, because actually, well, how long is he going to work for? And then you have this sort of bit of a catch-22 scenario where, okay, yeah, you can have spousal maintenance for 8 years, but you can't really get much of a mortgage on that. And then, okay, he's disclosed his pensions, but you want to live in this, you know, 1.2 million pound house, and you can't afford to. Like, there's this massive reality check where, but they think, well, why should I have to change? Why should my lifestyle have to change? And unfortunately, the reality is, the cost of living aside, that was the case beforehand. You can't take one income and split it 2 ways and expect the same lifestyle. So I see a lot of women having to have, you know, a real reality check where they're actually having to say it's not going to be the same. But I think that's sometimes the biggest fear. I mean, Laura described she didn't care if she was in a 2-bedroom flat. It was so important to her. And for some women, they're not wanting to get rid of their social circle. They're not wanting to stop going to their favorite gym or club membership, or they don't want to change their car because of the ego and the perception and the comfort and the lifestyle that affords them. You know, they like getting their nails done, they like looking a certain way, they like doing things that they like going to the gym, or they like whatever it is that they, you know, they're not willing to forgo it, but they will sacrifice maybe you know, being married to somebody that they're no longer in love with, because they know that they're not going to be able to have the same kind of lifestyle. And I see it happen quite a lot where it starts to get very controversial and very sticky towards after the financial disclosure point, where she starts to realize, you know, it's not going to be what she thought.
And I think that's where coaching can help, because the sooner you get that reality check, the more cost effective the negotiations are going to be. And it's such an emotional adjustment, because it does feel unfair. If you gave up a career by agreement that might have been lucrative, you might have been in a position, if you'd not had children, for example, to earn more than your husband. And if you've given that up by agreement, it feels really unfair that 20, 25, 30 years down the line, all of that counts for nothing. But the reality is, for many, many women, that is the reality. And, you know, I feel like I often play the bad cop. It's like, you need to get your head around that. You just need to get your head around it, because it is what it is. But, you know, we talk about, is there light in divorce? I can think of one client whose husband was saying she could live in a flat above a chicken shop after having a nice 3-bedroom townhouse in the centre of London. And she's in a 1-bedroomed flat and she's really happy. And yes, she didn't get to house her adult children as she'd hoped, but she's happy. And she wouldn't go back, even though the divorce was absolutely horrendous and she felt like her life was pretty much over. Fast forward 18 months and she's no longer living with him. And her children have found their way because they were young adults. She has her own little bit of heaven that's hers. So actually, even if you don't get what you want, you will be okay.
And there's a price that we pay for being mothers. So Jennie described it in looking after her 2 girls. You've just described it, Emma, where she wanted to house her adult children. I see a lot of older women with adult, they're not children, adults that were or are their children. And, you know, Jennie described to us before, her 26-year-old is just moving out. So people are, you know, not moving out at 18 anymore. They are hanging around a little bit longer. And Laura, you described your children more from a loving perspective. You didn't want your children to see a relationship in that same sort of context. So all of us have described like what it would do to the children. And for a lot of women, that's their first and their foremost. And so sometimes their intention is to, I think, Emma, you described before about, you know, do I give up the pension to keep a roof over my head for all the reasons we've just described, because I've got to take the children to school and I've got to look after the kids, or even, you know, you might still be running around adults even. What kind of advice do you give to women who are in this sort of like predicament where they're between a rock and a hard place? Do they go and get a job? Do they hope that if they sort of dig their feet in, that they get more child maintenance maybe for a bit longer or a bit more because, you know, they're not working? Or are you more of an advocate of Jennie's approach, where it's a case of where she worked hard, got the income and paid him off and off he went? Like what I know every circumstances are different, but what would be your advice around it?
So my advice would be, if there is no particular reason why you shouldn't work, start to think about the future now. So if you're not in poor health, you know, and if your husband isn't, and you and your husband are not ultra high net worth individuals, then it is likely that you will be expected to move to financial independence sooner rather than later. And, you know, the ages of your children play into that. So, for example, if you know that you need to retrain or you want to retrain, you don't want to go back to a career you may have left 10 years ago, and you think, actually, I'd fancy doing this career, and actually it might mean that I need to go back to university. Well, start to research that. How much is it going to cost? What kind of support could your soon-to-be ex support you with in the meantime? When might you then get into employment? And of course, how much you earn and how far you can go will depend on your age and the ages of your children and all of those things. But this is where having a plan is super helpful, because you might actually get a bit of equity from the house extra on top to pay those fees, because it might actually make sense in your circumstance to do that, to take you to financial independence sooner rather than later. Equally, the opposite may be true. It might be that you have to give up on a dream because actually it's more important for you personally just to get back into employment, start a job straight away so that you can get some mortgage borrowing capacity. So one size never fits all. So you've got to think about your values. What's important to you? Where do you want to be? And your children are only part of that equation. As a mother, you think the children are everything, but actually they're not. And people think, oh my goodness, how can you say that? Because the reality is, one day, hopefully your children will be grown and leave you. And unless you want to be financially dependent on your children as an older lady with no pension, then you need to start thinking about how you're going to be financially independent when your children are grown. So if that means letting the house go now, downsizing, readjusting your life, making it easy for you to manage your bills. So you might have to put yourself through the Open University if you choose to. You can do that, and then you can go back up the housing market if you choose to. But actually, lots of people find that downsizing is okay, actually.
It's a massive price of womanhood, isn't it? Of being especially a mother. I mean, I've done an interview with Scottish widows on there, and I've done a podcast, not a podcast, so a blog on one of my websites about I was actually at their Women in Retirement launch. They do a report every year, and women that are single parents or women who have divorced are so financially disadvantaged that a large majority, like something like a third of women, will go into retirement in poverty. And that's the likelihood of that happening is 10 times more that if you are divorced or you've been a single parent, because you put the kids first. And it's almost like, if that's the case, should there be like, I don't know, you go to like mother and parenting when you're pregnant, or I don't know, contraception classes or something on, okay, well, if you're going to get, or even like the priest, do you realise if you get married and you are going to be financially reliant on your husband, that if you get divorced, you're basically pretty screwed? I mean, why don't we have that conversation with people? We put like loves and stickers and we hope that it's all going to be perfect, but that's the reality, isn't it? And it's really sad that we don't talk about it. As women, we don't talk about that. That's what the more and more I've been in this industry, that's the reality, and it's really bloody sad, because you get married because you love the person, right?
Yeah.
I think because of my job, I carried on working. So just to give everyone a bit of context, if you don't know, when I was 14 weeks pregnant, I was made redundant. I was a regional sales manager for a financial services firm. I earned more than my husband. It was 2027, so the recession was announced in 2008. I couldn't get a job. I had to sign on. I went to the job centre. They didn't know what to do with me. Massively overqualified, didn't get a job, eventually got a part-time job working for a charity about 18 months later. So I was out of work for a little bit of time in the recession, and I hated it. Don't get me wrong, I love being a mum, but my brain wasn't stimulated. I wasn't interested in making more flapjacks or working out how to make a curry from scratch. That's just not what I was about, and I'm still not about. And my husband was like, don't worry about getting other work, you know, or my dad was like, oh, just go and work in a bank, Becky, just go and get like a cashier kind of job. I actually did try that at one point, and my confidence was so shot. And so, you know, I had an underactive thyroid from having my first baby. I had a newborn, I wasn't sleeping, I was unwell, my confidence was absolutely in the toilet. And so I didn't get this job. So I didn't then bother. And everyone around me was like, don't worry about it. You know, Will's working. And my husband's like, I'll support you. It's all positive stuff. And I was like, no, I know this path. I've seen it in my friends, my family, especially. I've seen it with clients for years, because I've been in financial services over 10 years at that point. I was like, I am not giving up my independence. And I know that's not for everybody, and there's no judgment for those that choose to stay at home. But I do think that women should be more informed about what that could look like if things change.
Absolutely.
Am I ranting here, ladies? I mean,
I just wanted to share a story from one of my closest friends who I think set it up really well when they got married and decided to have children, and made the decision that she would be a stay-at-home parent and he would go to work. Again, very similar to what Emma described, both earning well. Probably actually she could have earned more than him in the future. But they made that decision as a family. But what I love about what they did is that they kept everything equal. She was given a lump sum of money out of their joint savings that was just for her, so she had her own independence. They continued to put in a pension for her even though she wasn't working, because they saw their household income as their household income. And I'm so pleased that they did all of those things, because yes, they're happily married, but she's now been a stay-at-home parent for 15 years. And so, you know, if things do go south, had they not set all of that up, she would have found it really difficult. But I know that she can sleep at night knowing that whatever happens, she is still independent and she would still be okay financially.
Yeah.
And there's not many people that do that. And the reason I bring it up is because I want to share that with my daughter. Like, yes, become a parent, you'll be an amazing mother, and if you want to stay at home with them, do that. But what do your finances look like? How are you remaining independent? What property are you owning? What pension are you putting into? What is your earning in the future? Like, yes, you want to do the baby phase now, but what skills have you got, and how does that look like in the future? And I'm really open. Sorry?
You think she'll go back to work, Laura? Like eventually?
Yeah. So she's just thinking now actually about going back to work, having had those 15 years off. And again, that's thrown a different thing into the mix now, because it's like, hang on a minute, you've had this amazing, when I say stay-at-home mum, she is fresh cooking, on absolutely everything. The house is spotless. It's going to be very different when she goes back full time and he's full time, and then, you know, the children still need stuff. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting story as to how it unravels.
And I love that, the fact that they still put into her pension. Oh my God, I absolutely love that. That's brilliant. I was talking to a client this morning. Her daughter is pregnant, early 20s, not with the partner by the sounds of it. And I'm telling her to still put into her pension, because, you know, she shouldn't have this big gap. What my concern is that, let's just say in 2 or 3 years' time, I'm not saying that they sound like a lovely couple, what you've just described, your friends, is that if she's not financially independent, if they were to get divorced, and she'd be expected to basically be thrown in the deep end to go back to a full-time employment. But that's that again, it's the risk that as women we're having to take, and it is a massive leap of faith. So we have like this the child cost, and then we also have this sort of cost of actually if the love doesn't prevail and love doesn't work, you know, we're sort of, if we're choosing that kind of path, we're left in a situation where we could be much worse off. And I just find it terribly sad, that I think, for me, I mean, I know it's not the same story for everybody, but unfortunately I do hear a lot of it.
Well, here's the thing. I think I encourage my clients to see that when the relationship breaks down, if it goes, you know, down the court route, it's like the family PLC is breaking apart. There's no emotion. It's just like, we've got these assets. How do we split them fairly so everyone's housed and the assets are distributed? But if we saw marriage rather than the romantic fairy tale, and, you know, I'm a sucker for a romance, just like everyone else. Married at First Sight is one of my favourite guilty pleasures. But the reality is, if we approached marriage and having children in that same way, going, what are we going to do if we have children? How are we going to provide for ourselves financially? What are we going to do if it breaks down? And, you know, if you've got lots of wealth, you might have prenuptial agreements. But if you don't have that level of wealth, you may think that it's not worth the financial investment because they are expensive. But like Laura's friend, you can have that conversation. It doesn't actually cost you anything.
Exactly. I think you're right. I like that idea.
The other thing I was just thinking about, I think it was something you said, Rebecca, is that I think the reason that it's even more important to have these conversations now with our next generations that are going to go into relationships and get married is that the world is so much more accessible these days. And so the chances of your marriage breaking down are much higher than it was back in the 60s. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have, you know, actually a woman, get this right, it wasn't till 1968 that a woman could rent a property in her own name.
Wow.
So if you wanted to get divorced back then, you weren't going to be able to go and live anywhere else because legally you weren't allowed.
Crazy.
So, you know, we need to have these discussions. I think there should be, you know, pre-marriage counselling where you can iron all this stuff out and have open conversations about it, because the chances are it's not going to be for your lifetime.
And that's scary, right?
But it's the reality we live in. You know, there's too much temptation. The world is too open. We're not happy to settle. Mental health's a big thing. So we will put ourselves first.
Women are choosing themselves like you did,
Yes.
Laura, up time and more and more and more. They're not accepting
Yes.
them. Unfortunately, I think this is not a man bashing show. I've talked about this before. Is that actually men are under quite a lot of pressure. They're expected to step up. You know, they're expected to change. They're expected to do a hell of a lot more than what they saw their fathers do. This generation of dads particularly, and you've got wives like me going, what are you doing today? Oh my goodness, man child. What's going on? The expectations are that much higher. And even if I think back, I've been with him 24 years, but even if I think back like 10, 15 years ago, I was different. We were different. The expectations were different, even though I've always been a bit of a, you know, have not high expectations, but, you know, I'm not one to be cooking dinner and putting one on dinner on the table kind of thing. He tends to sort himself out with some, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, we'll all sit down as a family, but he's busy, you know, like he's at work till later. So I'll eat with the kids and I'll have something ready for him up to, you know, he could pop something on to warm up, but it's not like I'll be staying up late, you know, darning his socks or anything. Things have all changed an awful lot over the years. So I don't know, there's almost like a whole new marketplace there. I think don't you think there's a whole industry of like how to get women prepared for the new age of I don't know, life.
Well, I mean, life is hard at the moment. Marriage is hard. And I think, you know, back in the 60s, you got married and it was harder to get out of it. So you maybe tried a bit harder, but now it's so easy. And, you know, even though Married at First Sight is my guilty pleasure, you know, in a way, they're not great shows because it's just like, oh, you know, if it doesn't work out, we'll just, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, of course, you know, when you have children and when you're financially intertwined, it's just not that straightforward.
No.
And it's very, and, you know, divorce, even if it's a good divorce, isn't cheap. You know, you spend more on a good divorce than you'll spend on the wedding, for sure.
So what makes for a good divorce then? Let's try and turn this into a bit more of a positive some tips and hints for people. What makes for a good divorce? What things, Emma, could they prepare?
So I think, you know, if you're in a situation like Laura's and you can actually have an open, honest, rational conversation, that is the best that you can hope for, where two people sit down and say, we're done, aren't we? These are the assets we've got. You're not worried about anything being hidden. We're not worried about anything being controlled. If you're not as fortunate as Laura has been, then get yourself a plan so you understand yourself and your needs, but also think about the other person too. And yes, your children are just one aspect of those things, but actually, you know, I talk about the single parents being the captains of the ship. So if you're the captain of the ship as a mother and you're steering your kids in the right direction, they will be fine. And if that means, there may be no option but to move house because there may not be enough money. And actually, if you're okay with it, your children will be okay with it. So if you're not in an abusive situation that you need to leave immediately, take your time, think about it, get a plan. I talk about having a divorce team. So have a financial planner, have a solicitor, find a mediator. Think about the friendship support that you're going to use, one that is good for you. So it might not be your bestie and it may not be your mother because they may have always hated your husband, so therefore they're biased, or they might really love him, therefore they're biased. So you need people that can just go, what do you want to do? What's right for you? And you've got to be your own cheerleader.
Definitely.
You touched on something then about the men, because my husband was absolutely petrified that I was going to screw him over financially. He had friends all around him that had been completely screwed financially from their ex-wives, and he was petrified of it. And something I did really early on, like when I first started to voice how unhappy I was without even the divorce word being mentioned, I made a promise to him and said, look, I'm never going to hold the children against you. I'm never going to intend to screw you over financially. All I want is for us to be fair and open and honest with each other. I will do nothing more than that. I'm not going to come after more than I need to. Like, I'm independent myself. Just because I'm entitled to X, Y, Z doesn't mean that that's what I'm going to go for.
Yeah. Jennie, how about you and your circumstances? It sounds like you were very giving.
Yeah, I was, because I did feel guilty. And I'm not sorry that I was as giving around it, because at the end of the day, my outcome was good. But I just think you have to get really good information. A lot of people make choices on wrong information. So they're like, oh, I couldn't possibly get divorced because of X, or I couldn't possibly do that because this is what it will mean for me. But my story isn't going to be the same outcome as your story. And so many people that I've spoke to are like, oh, I wouldn't be able to afford it. I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to do that. And it's like, you don't know that. You're going on the wrong information. So if you get the information and know you can't afford it, at least you have the truth. And lots of people are making decisions on their quality of their lifestyle, because this is your life that you're living, and it's the wrong information.
Any other tips for you, Jennie? Sorry.
Well, I was really fortunate that at that point in my life, I'd been going to like networking meetings. So I had a family lawyer there, I had a mortgage lady, and I had a finance lady. So I asked for advice. So that I was really grateful of that. But if you cannot get that from your own network, there are Facebook groups out there where you can find it, and just ask.
Yeah. Emma, were you going to say something? Sorry.
I was going to say to Jennie is that, so Jennie went back to her lawyer. Now, reopening financial settlements are really hard and virtually unheard of. So I just was curious, did you manage to revisit your financial settlement, Jennie, or not?
So all I did was I got her to write a letter that said, this has come to light. During the divorce, I was very fair. I didn't take any maintenance from you. And because my understanding is you were going to live alone. This is clearly not the case. So therefore, I want the child maintenance for my child for that 16 months. It was not hardly any money. It was the principal. And I also said, I wanted the money back that I had given in good faith that you were going on holiday with your friends when you were not. So all I asked for, and it was, we're talking about £4,000. We are not talking about a lot of money. And I just got her to write the letter, and we agreed what would happen if he didn't respond, what my next options were. And probably about 2 months later, he did reply. He advised that his salary at the time was less, so he offered an amount, and I just said, yeah, I'll take it. And I gave the money to the girls because I thought,
oh, well done.
I don't need the money, but it's the principle. You were really dishonest, and you did not need to be. I was very fair. And at the outcome, from the outcome of this, the children and him have lost their relationship. And unfortunately, I cannot do anything to change that. I've tried to speak to them about it. But so we just did a letter, and that was And that was enough.
And the reason I say that is because anyone listening, I want them to understand that actually, for most people, for the majority of people, that financial order, whether it's agreed or done by the court, it is the end. And so you need to do your due diligence. You need to ensure that the numbers that you are working with and the situation that you're being presented with is as much of the truth as you can find as possible. So some people are aware of situations they can't prove it legally without doing illegal things, in which case the evidence is inadmissible. But your situation might have been different, Jennie, if you'd known that he was going with this other partner, but equally it may not have been, because it is really, really difficult to establish that you're not going to move in with somebody else immediately. And even people who are living with other partners, they'll say, well, you know, they've got their own children and they're not as financially wealthy, and they make disclosure for the other party really tricky and challenging, and then it becomes too expensive. So generally speaking, you just need to do your due diligence and be able to let go. So you were really fortunate that he agreed a second sort of tranche of money to you, because he could have just ignored it, and actually you probably wouldn't have got anywhere.
I didn't do it for me. I did it for the girls, and I gave them the money, and you know, it was more about principle. I just thought, I'm not really having this. Like, you've humiliated us, and that was the more hurtful thing. Like, you know, we were hurt by that. And I could get over that, but I'm not sure the girls can get over that. And that
because it's their dad, isn't it? And then they feel let down. And so, and that is the issue about separating money from emotion, because in the divorce process, you really have to get good at that, and it takes practice, and it takes usually a long time.
The next question was, what key skill do we have to have going through the divorce process? So you're saying about basically take the emotive out. That's a skill. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it so massively is. It's like, generally speaking, and this is a generalization, but generally speaking, it doesn't matter what is done, how awful it is, you're not going to be financially compensated for that. You know, you don't get more money because they've had an affair. You don't get more money because they've been unpleasant to you, because the numbers are the numbers, and he needs a home and you need a home. And it's about using coaches, therapists, trauma specialists, whatever you need to do to be able to let all of that emotion be dealt with somewhere else. It's not denying that emotion. It's not saying it's not important, but it's not important in the financial process for the majority of people. And when you understand that, you go, oh yeah, I get it now. Right, okay. So this is just a business transaction.
Yeah. Laura, your situation was quite different, and Jennie trusted her partner by the sounds of it. In fact, she was feeling so guilty, and she had no reason to feel guilty, from motherhood, from saying she wanted to leave. She sort of trusted what he was saying, and unfortunately it turns out that was not right. He was lying about the circumstances. But in your situation, you trusted your partner, and it was all amicable, and it's worked out great, which is really positive. But how did you know? Like, how did you know that he was being truthful? Because I hear so many women where I mean, I think they sort of get an inkling, but then something will confirm it, where they don't send a certain document, or they avoid trying to do something in the process, and that just sort of like a bit of a red flag. But for you, how did you know that there was no red flags? Like, you didn't have to learn that skill about taking the emotion out of it so much, right?
Yeah, I didn't know. I just had to trust what he was telling me. And what I did was I got laser focused on what's a good outcome for me, what's a great outcome for me, and what's the best outcome for me. And if I get any one of those things, I'm going to be okay. And that's kind of where I went into it, rather than I had independent legal advice from a lawyer, and the amount that he was telling me from what he was disclosing was astronomical. And it wasn't in my good, better, or best. It was crazy. But I didn't see it like that. I just viewed it as I need this for me and my children. Everything else I can build for myself. And actually, if I took half of the pension and half of the Bitcoin and half of the rental properties, that's going to cause a problem for him financially, which ultimately will cause a problem for my children financially. And I had to trust that if I left him with wealth, that he would then be able to be living near us, which he is. He lives 5 minutes down the road. He'll be able to pay for their first car, put towards a deposit for a house for them, get them through university, take them on nice holidays, all those things, which he wouldn't have been able to do, I don't think, if I'd gone for what I was told that I should have gone for. So I had to trust. And even to this day, you know, I know what Emma said is absolutely right, like get all your numbers and stuff. And I'm ashamed to say it, Emma, we didn't. I have no idea about his pension pot. I have no idea how much the value of the Bitcoin is. I have no idea what the rental income of the property was. Because for me, it was about, what do I need for me and the kids now? What would I be happy with? And it was the house and maintaining the home, and having a child maintenance that was enough for us.
Was you earning at the time though, Laura? Did you have a job?
Yeah.
So I think that plays a, like you'd say, you're like, obviously if you got maintenance and you kept the house and you sort of felt like, well, I can cope with the rest.
Yeah, exactly. But even to this day, like, I don't know how he affords his lifestyle. I have wondered, I've thought, like, is he a secret millionaire that I don't know about? But you kind of have to let that go once you've decided. For me, once I got my good, better or best, it was like, have to let everything else go and trust that that then means that ultimately the children will inherit it one day. So if he is a secret
You did get it signed off by the court though, didn't you, Laura?
Yeah.
Good, because that is the other thing to mention, is like people who do it on their own, because they do get on well, they sometimes don't understand that you actually have to get it signed off by a court, because if you don't, it's not legally binding. So when I was a mediator, which is a long time ago now, we had a lady come for a mediation session. She didn't earn a lot of money. She had become ill and couldn't work. She didn't have her own pension. Her and her husband had divorced between themselves over 30 years ago. They'd sold the family house and just gone their separate ways. They'd stayed friends. They socialized with one another, but she had never remarried. He had remarried, but she wanted then, 30 years later, a share of his pension. And he's like, well, she can't do this because it's 30 years on. It's like, well, you never got it signed off by a court. So technically, actually, she can. So you need to be aware that if you agree it between you, great, but do get it ratified, signed off through the courts in a consent order.
Yeah, I did hear something once about, I don't know if this is legally true or not, that it's you have to go through I thought you had to go through the financial disclosure process. I thought that was a thing, like you had to do that.
You can choose if you want to not to.
You didn't.
If you do it through lawyers, they will get you to sign all sorts of documents so that you can't have any legal redress against them. When you fill in the document known as the D81, which accompanies the consent order, it asks you what information you've had, what legal help you've had, whether you've been to mediation. If a court is not happy with what you put on that form, they can pull it and say, we want to have a hearing. But if you and your husband are absolutely adamant you don't want to do any of it, and you understand the consequences, so if Laura found out next week that her husband's actually a billionaire, well, it's too late, I'm afraid, for Laura. But
and I'm
sounds like Laura
can
live with that.
I'm fine with it. I'm like,
Laura's got her own.
Is that putting up on your drive, Laura? Is that you've got a new Ferrari?
I know. I'm fine. Like, just spend it on the kids then. Like,
yeah. But Laura, you're in a position where you can manage for yourself, but there will be some women, and this is why this process is that if you're at risk of financial abuse, this is the check and a balance to make sure that you're not coerced into signing an agreement that you don't understand, that you're not happy with. And of course, many women do know their numbers because they're the breadwinner, and actually they know exactly what they're signing. And I think we can't forget about those. But getting it ratified in a consent order ends your claims against each other in life and death. Otherwise, if you don't remarry, that claim can still be made.
I also learnt though that a long time ago, money doesn't make you happy. So that's why I'm not sitting here super wealthy, by the way, but if he is a billionaire, knock yourself out, mate, because it ain't going to make you happy.
Yeah. I talk about wealth and money all the time. At the end of the day, my horses do cost me a lot of money, but they bring me also a lot of happiness. And you know, holidays are nice and big holidays are nice, but if your day-to-day is not, you're not happy, then what's the point? You know, they should be extras, not the actual thing of it. Okay, so we're going to start wrapping up. Any last tips that you would like to give? I'll start with Jenny. Anything you'd like to add, Jen?
I think putting yourself first is the hardest thing. You know, when you're a mum, it's very hard to put yourself first and realise that actually it's sometimes is better for the children not to be married. And it's very hard to put yourself first. I still find it harder, even though my girls are older. I still put them first. So, you know, I've spent all weekend moving my daughter out, you know, at my cost. So I think if people put themselves first and realize what they actually really want and what will make them happy, and then just go out and get some help and just get some advice. You know, One of Many was really good for me at that point, but I also had a divorce coach, and she really helped me to see the reality of the situation rather than what was my own thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I mean, I've spoken to quite a few ladies recently that are like 50, 55 and divorced. I think they've been divorced, all of them, I think. And they've helped their children. Like one of them had like 4 kids, one of them had 2. Both their words were, I've got my kids out of the house and bought their own home, helped them do that. Now I need to start looking after myself. And my message is that, you know, Jen, help your daughter move out, help pay to a deposit, but you've got to look after yourself first. You've got to be putting that little bit away in the pension, and then you can help your children. You shouldn't be helping your children to the detriment to your future. And that, unfortunately, you'll be then having conversations with me when you're 55, 60 saying, I wish I'd done it sooner. And I have a lot of them, unfortunately. Laura, anything you would like to add as your lasting words of wisdom?
I think for me, what you put out, you get back. You know, if you're a nasty bitch, he's going to not be nice back to you. Like, just be amicable and fair and honest and patient and do what's right for the kids. You know, if you are like that, then you're standing in a better chance of someone meeting you back with that. And I know that I'm very fortunate with the divorce that we had and the relationship that we still continue to have. But if you are working with a narcissist or someone that's toxic in any way, if you're toxic back with them, it's just going to be fire on fire on fire. At least if you can try to put out positivity, I believe that if you put out positivity will come back, because it's very hard to be negative towards someone that's positive. So, you know, just be true to yourself, stick to your guns, and put your own happiness first before money or anything else.
Thank you, Laura. That's lovely. And I love the fact that, yeah, if you're going to be a nasty bitch.
It's true, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
and it's hard. We've all got that inner bitch inside of us, especially when someone's cheated on us or screwed us over. But, you know, if you are going to be like that, and I see it, I've seen it with friends. Like they're moaning about their exes, and I'm like, yeah, but what did you do to feel? Oh yeah, well that makes sense now then, because you're just tit for tat all the time.
And the kids, at the end of the day, the kids are just the worst off. My parents split up when I was very, very young, and my mum didn't get the chance, or I'm not quite sure the right word was to put it, but she didn't get my dad had full responsibility of us. But back then we had to live with my grandparents because I was a female, my nan was a female, my dad was a male. They wouldn't let a female go and live with a man on their own. This we're talking like, you know,
wow,
2 years ago, so very different back then. And but my mum and dad never got on. Like, they weren't in the same room together, they wouldn't even have phone calls together. Obviously back then didn't have texts, WhatsApps, emails, nothing. It was just the old phone in the hallway. And that was, my nan had all that communication with my mum about seeing us. And my literally saying the words mum and dad just are weird to me, completely alien. And I'm fine, by the way, so I turned out okay. I had issues, I had to work on them. I use One of Many, which is a great community for women, for coaching programs, etc., to work through some of my stuff, to stop me being a bitch, to stop that inner bitch and the victim mode. and I've come out a better person for it. But my point being is my dad and my mum never said a bad word against each other. So my impression of my mum is that of my mum, and I still have a relationship with her. And that of my dad is that of my dad. I wasn't influenced. And I've seen many friends and family that have basically used their partners as a punching bag via their children, or their children as the punching bag to get to the other parent. And no one works out on top, and the kids always lose.
Yep.
Emma, I'm going to come to you last. Any lasting words of wisdom?
So I think the ladies have summed it up perfectly. It's your self-worth has got to be the starting point. If you don't believe that you're worth it, you won't come out of the divorce process with the settlement that you want and need, and you may be entitled to. Like Laura says, money doesn't buy you happiness, but if you don't know what you need, then you're always going to be on the back foot. It is okay to walk away if you're offered enough as a settlement. You think, I don't want to fight this person, I've got enough, I know I can make it on my own, then it's okay. But equally, if you're listening to this podcast and you've got 3 children and you haven't worked for 20 years and you think, I can't afford to walk away, then it's equally okay to say, no, I need more, and I need to fight for more if I have to. And so knowing your numbers with somebody like you, Rebecca, is absolutely key. Just know your numbers.
Perfect. So this podcast is going to be titled "Divorce, Is There Light at the End of the Tunnel?" So Jennie, are you happier now that you're divorced, and is there light?
Oh yeah, I'm a lot happier. Oh my God, that almost goes without saying. Yeah, I mean, I think my ex-husband was probably a million times happier as well. Like, we didn't have a great relationship, but as a person, he was okay. He just wasn't my person after a period of time. So I would say that's okay to admit that. So yeah, I would definitely say there's light at the end of the tunnel, and the tunnel actually disappears, to be honest, and you actually see a whole nother world out there.
Love that. Laura, if your dog has stopped barking, are you happier now? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, she has stopped barking. Yes, very much so. And I know 100% my ex-husband is as well. So
amazing. Well, thank you all for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate your time. Obviously, you've given up your time just to share your experience, and for that I really thank you. And Emma, I will be sharing in the show notes any contact details. If anyone's looking for a divorce coach, then Emma is amazing. Go and check her out, and I will share her links below. So I'll thank you both all for coming, and sending you all lots of love. Have a lovely rest of the week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good to chat.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Accelerate Your Wealth. For further help or to connect with Rebecca directly, please head over to the website www.rebeccarobertson.co.uk, where you can find further information on our planner, book, and how to further maximise your wealth. Our sponsor, Evolution Financial Planning, for regulated advice on pensions, investments, mortgages, insurances on www.evolutionfinancialplanning.co.uk/podcast.